Good evening, everyone. When the sun
Good evening. Welcome to the City of Burbank Infrastructure Oversight Board meeting for October 22nd, 2020. We're calling the meeting to order, and please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we can start with roll call.
Armin Avazian.
present.
Walter Brennan Jr. is absent. Maria Coronado.
Present.
Greg Jackson.
Present.
Vanessa Rishal is absent. Tamala Takahashi.
Here.
And Jeff Vandervoort. Maria, you're muted there.
Got that. Let's move to announcements.
I did have one, Chairman.
Mr. Berkman, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick note, I will need to leave the meeting at 7 o'clock if we go to that time, and I'll leave it in the capable hands of Mr. Hahn. Just want to let the board know. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, so we're going to move to public comment, and I've been asked to read this before we move to public comment. During this election season, we want to remind members of the public of some ground rules for speaking during the public comment period. Under the Brown Act and the Infrastructure Oversight Board's agenda, members of the public may comment on any item listed on the agenda or any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of this board. As such, comments about the election, including comments about specific candidates, even for city offices, are not within the subject matter jurisdiction of this body. Except for identifying yourself as running for a particular office, if you speak about yourself as a candidate or speak about any other candidates, the chair will interrupt and remind you to confine your remarks to agenda items or something within the board's jurisdiction. Thank you. Do we have anyone for public comment tonight?
Yes, we do
No.
have a caller.
Okay. Are we trying to make a connection?
Hello, I've got our first
Okay.
caller, Noreen Castellano
Noreen, you're on live with the Infrastructure Oversight Board.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noreen Castellani, and I live at 3505 West Alameda, and I live between Cordova and Avon, directly across the street from the Teleria project. I'm calling related to a parking issue along the Alameda corridor from the 3200 block to the 3500 block. We have no parking restrictions, but we do have a new street cleaning restriction on Wednesdays. So on Wednesdays, all of the people on Alameda need to move our cars off of the street onto Avon or Cordova. And those streets do have restrictions of 2-hour parking. And permit parking. So, most of the properties from 3200 to 3500 are apartments. I think there's two single-family residences that I'm aware of. But anyway, that's kind of irrelevant. My issue is that on these Wednesdays, when we have to move our cars onto Avon and Cordova, we have to have a parking permit in order to stay there more than 2 hours. And currently, all of the dwellings on Alameda are only given one permit per apartment. So that means if there's 2 adults who live in an apartment, they only get one parking permit to park on Avon or Cordova. The closest place for us to drive to park our car may not sound far to you, but it's 0.3 of a mile away onto Oak. We can't go across the street and park on the other side of Alameda because that's where Teleria is. So we have to actually drive deep into the neighborhood. And I'm sure you're aware there are cul-de-sacs now also. So this is not an easy way for us to go around and move our cars. For me, this was kind of an issue before we even had the street cleaning issue on Wednesdays. To me, it seemed really inequitable that I could only get one parking permit to park 20 feet from my house. The homes on Cordova and Avon and Ontario and California, all of these homes get up to 5 parking permits per residence. I get one, and I can't even park anywhere near my house. I have to drive miles or 0.3 of a mile away. Now, I happen to be a homeowner, and this really disturbs me because I've got parking 20 feet from my house, but I have to drive down to Oak to park my second car. When I say my second car, the second adult owner's car that lives in my house. So for me, it seems really inequitable that the people on Avon and Cordova get 5 permits and I get 1. It feels a bit discriminatory against the apartment dwellers versus the single-family residences. So that feels kind of funny to me. And it feels weird that I should have to drive so far away to park my car when there's parking 20 feet from me. And I feel like the people on Alameda have already suffered with limited access to our properties because of the newly installed cul-de-sacs and Teleria. And so I feel like we're on the front lines of a lot of problems and our needs aren't really being addressed. And I'm hoping that there's some way that we can find a way to give us parking permits for our cars on Avon and Cordova and Ontario and California because it's affecting a lot of us. So I'm hoping to get this on some sort of, fast track to discussion and resolve so that we don't have to drive blocks away from our home to be able to park our cars.
I hear what you're saying. I'm going to refer to staff on this one. Mr. Berkman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. For the general information for the board who is serving as now the de facto traffic commission, the preferential parking programs as of this fiscal year, July, are under the purview of the Community Development Department. And if anybody would like to have permit parking considered, they can give the Community Development Department a call. at 818-238-5176. That's all.
Madam Chairman, Ken, that just doesn't really wash. I mean, that's kicking the can down the street. I mean, this lady has a serious problem that was created in part by, the folks in the city council and the community development department. So I really think we need to be more proactive than what you're advocating. I would like to see this either agendized or a report within 60 days from you and from CDD.
It looks like that's something we can do. We can cover that under our future agenda items. Ms. Takahashi.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask what responsibility or authority do we have in this body to address this issue? Is this something that we can make a decision on, or is this something that we would advocate for on the behalf of the resident, or to ask questions, or what would be our place in this?
Through the chair, the board does not have any decisionary or discretionary authority over the preferential parking program. It goes directly to and through staff.
Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Ms. Takahashi, you have another question?
Yeah, follow up. So if we were to agendize this, what would we be able to discuss, or how would we approach it if it were on our agenda?
I would suggest through the chair, if Mr. Jackson wants to make a motion for consideration of the board, that it would be to bring community development to the board for a report on how we do our residential preferential parking program. Yeah, that would be it.
I just don't want a broad discussion on the issues. I want to see how we can address and find an equitable solution to a problem that the city is, to a major degree, been, the culprit, made the problem created the problem.
Well, I think it's definitely something we can take a look at and see what we can do to put our 2 cents in. I think we should put that down under future agenda items at the end of our agenda.
Jeff has something
okay?
to add.
Pardon?
I think Jeff has something to add.
Okay. Mr. Vanderboort.
Madam Chair, thank you. May I ask, as a board member, that we ask staff to respond to the speaker more directly and put them in direct contact with someone at the Community Development Department rather than give them their number. That is, if we can obtain her contact information, doesn't have to be done publicly, then staff can follow up and we can hope for a call as early as tomorrow or something like that, because even putting this on the agenda for us still may mean 30 to 45 days or whatever time we have as our next meeting. So at the very least, we can ask staff to please intercede at putting this person in direct contact with the CDD person who would be able to respond a little faster.
We can do that, Madam Chair. I was just trying to avoid having a discussion about an item that wasn't on the agenda.
I appreciate that. And we do want to respond. So I like Mr. Vanderboort's suggestion, and I think staff will probably do that, reach out to her.
I agree. I mean, rather than have a cold call by the person who lives in Alameda, to have some involvement to at least get them to a if not a decision maker, someone beyond the counter kids who will give them the standard answer out of our municipal code. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Does anyone else have anything to respond? Ms. Takahashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One last comment. I just wanted to thank the caller for calling in to our meeting tonight and sharing her perspective. I actually was on that street today, walking in that exact spot. I think I walked by her house today, walking the neighborhood. So I know exactly what she's talking about, and I appreciate her calling in. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for reaching out to us tonight. Ms. Carrion, do we have any other public comment?
Let me just verify 1 second. No, we do not have any further callers.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to the consent calendar, the approval of the minutes. Recommendation,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Vanderboort.
Madam Chair, I move for approval of the minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Should we call for a vote?
Aye.
Armin Avazian,
Yes.
Maria Coronado,
Yes.
Greg Jackson,
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi,
Yes.
and Jeff Vanderboort.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're moving to reports to the board, and I want to announce that we're swapping items 2 and 3. So we'll move to first quarter CIP report, and then Central Library Design Study will be after that. Mr. Berkman?
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Library Director Golden for letting us jump the line a little bit and before the library update. So as this board knows, the quarterly updates for the board are required in accordance with the municipal code that established the board. And it's specifically noted that the board will receive quarterly reports on the status of funded projects. And we are very pleased to be in front of you to present our first quarterly update. And it's the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Hahn to continue the presentation. Mr. Hahn.
Thanks, Ken. Good evening, Chair Coronado and members of the board. My name is Yoon Han, City's Capital Projects Program Manager. The purpose of today or tonight is to share with the IOB the size of the current CIP program and to update what the city has accomplished thus far. In fiscal year 1920, City Council funded 40 projects. Some were new and some were existing projects that required additional funding for Parks and Rec, for Public Works, and also for CDD. And the total funding was $22 million for fiscal year 1920. And of these projects, some of the projects are in planning still, design and construction, and also are considered ongoing. And ongoing projects are multi-year projects that are part of it's a multi-year project or it's part of a program, such as the replacement of the citywide irrigation system. So it's a multi-year project, but it actually has a life to it where it will end in 6 years when all the irrigation system is replaced. Actually, the 6 years, I'm not sure exactly how long that is. But in fiscal year 2021, due to COVID, the city council approved a total of 15 projects or funded 15 projects. Of that, 5 were new projects and 10 were existing projects that require additional funding or were considered ongoing projects. And the total funding was actually $13 million. And as you're aware, that was the reduced project scope that the council and the board have actually approved. So, as I stated, the goal of tonight, one of the goals is actually to share with the IOB the total size of the project. And the carryover project actually is one thing that hasn't been truly identified before, where we actually have a total of 83 projects currently. That includes projects that were approved in fiscal year 2021 and also in also the carryover projects. As you could see, the Public Works total project is actually $42 million. That includes the fiscal year projects and also the carryover projects. Parks and Rec has a little over $6.5 million of projects that they're actually currently working on. And also we have various other departments and divisions actually working on projects. As you can see, CDD has about a little over $3 million. Library has a study, which actually they're presenting tonight. And also we have what's known as a pop-up project. Pop-up projects are projects that actually have not been, it's not part of the fiscal year budget projects. It's actually projects that came up in mid-year or in the year where due to certain situations, we actually had to work on the project. And one project is the Arch Pilaster at the Country Club Drive and Sunset Canyon Drive. It's a project that was actually brought forth from a car accident. It damaged the pilaster and the arch. So the project, it's approximately about $150,000. It's currently in design. And so these are pop-up projects that are unanticipated that comes up. And then we have also new projects that came up in fiscal year 2021. So as you can see, the fiscal year 2021, we have a little over $13 million. And then also the estimated carryover is about $42 million. And so the total CIP program currently has $55 million in the program that we're actually running at this time. This is a breakdown of the total projects that we have that are by department and also by different phase of the project. And as you can see, 78 existing open projects, which are carryover, and the 5 additional projects in fiscal year 2021. This is a slide for projects that we actually completed in fiscal year 1920 and also in 2021, the first quarter. So we actually have total of 13 projects that we completed in fiscal year 1920. And then we have 1 project that we actually completed in this quarter, which takes us to a total of 14. Here's some pictures of projects that are under construction. We have the Midtown Commercial Corridor Pedestrian Project. The project is funded partially by Metro, developer impact fee, and also Measure R. This project will enhance pedestrian safety by improving lighting, crosswalks, ADA ramps, and also includes installing new traffic signals. And then next is the project that's under construction. It's the Burbank Channel Bikeway. We are adding approximately 0.8 miles of Class 1 bike trail along Burbank Channel. And this project's almost done. I believe it's around 90% done at this time. And then we have projects that we've accomplished. We have the Phase 9 pavement project that we finished in 1920. Phase 10 project that we just mentioned last time. That project should be starting in November. So that's relative. It's scheduled to start in next month. And then we have the batting cages at Lazy and McCain Bridge Park. We actually installed Parks and Recs there. And we have the Safe Routes Cycle 10 that was completed in that last fiscal year. And also we have the McCain Bridge Park War Memorial that was actually finished. And then we had the Central HVAC that was actually finished in this fiscal year, this quarter. And here's some pictures of projects that were accomplished through the programmatic program. You have the Orange Grove parking structure, elevator, cab, interior replacement that was completed. You have also the exit and emergency lighting sign at the Orange Grove parking structure. And then you have the Mountain View Park backflow device replacement. Then also at the City Yard, they did some low voltage infrastructure work. And then at Jocelyn Center, you can see the electric panel replacement. You have the before and after pictures there. So as we move forward, the goal of the CIP program is to lower the number of the carryover projects each year and to build on our existing program to be able to deliver projects within schedule and budget, and also within the scope that's actually designated for the project. This will only be achievable through the teamwork. We've actually already started a lot of coordination efforts with the different departments, with Public Works, with CDD, Parks and Rec, and also with the purchasing group and the city attorney's office to try to better coordinate the efforts so that we actually communicate better and then hopefully have less issues come up. So I think through the coordination effort and a team effort, I believe that we can knock these projects out and close a lot of these out. And hopefully by probably not next quarter, but maybe by mid-year that we could actually hope to lower those numbers significantly that you will notice. And hopefully by this end of the fiscal year that will actually have a pretty big impact where we're making good headway. And that concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. That was a great report. Do I have any comments or questions from any of my fellow board members? I can't see everybody, so if you have questions, go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, I do. This is Greg Jackson. 2 questions. One, I drove across town last night on Alameda, and near Burroughs High School, the street has been narrowed to 2 lanes, and there's major digging going on the sort of southbound. Is it related to that major infrastructure project that's going across the valley, or what's going on Alameda? Is it one of ours?
Actually, I'm not aware of any projects in Alameda at this time, or what it might be. So they have to look.
Verdugo?
Did I say Alameda? I'm sorry. I meant Verdugo. I apologize. I got my streets mixed. It was Verdugo near Burroughs High School. There was major excavation going on in 2 of the lanes of traffic. There's a bike lane on both sides, so there really is only 1 lane of traffic each direction, but the street was narrowed significantly. And I was curious, is that something that we're working on, or is that something someone else is?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It could be BWP, or it could actually even be an encroachment permit work. So that's something we would have to actually contact the inspectors and see which project that is.
All right. My second question, that pop-up project you mentioned about a car accident on just a few blocks from my house. That entails redoing the arch. Is the city getting anything back from the insurance company of the driver that ran into that?
Yes, we have a program. So I'm working with the group that actually is working with the insurance company. I believe that we've actually notified them already that we will be invoicing them. And once the project is complete and we know exactly what that cost is, we will be forwarding that to the insurance company.
All right. That's good to hear. All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Takahashi, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have several questions. Thank you for this report. I've been looking forward to this update. I appreciate the level of detail in the report. All right, so I referred back to the last report that we received, which was in the May meeting, and I noticed that the numbers are pretty much the same. So does that mean there hasn't really been any change since May in the capital improvement list?
Since May, I don't recall that report, so I would have to refer back to that. So the numbers that you see, actually, I would say it's probably the same. I actually did the report based on the budget, the information I received at the end of the fiscal year. And so I would say probably from May and the numbers I presented, it is probably very similar. Where we're at probably right now, I believe as far as the money spent, there's probably little less than that as far as the $55 million. But so in the next fiscal year, so this report, really the intent was to try to show you where we're at, the size of the program, the projects that we're actually dealing with. And then I think, so in the next quarterly update, then we'll actually whittle it down and possibly even get into a little bit more detail on these projects too.
Okay, thank you. The reason why I asked is because during the May report, that was an update in the infrastructure budget based on adjustments for COVID. And so I was hoping today perhaps that we might get an update on how we're doing with the income, sales tax income, or any adjustments to the budget that might be because we know a little better now what predictions we might have of how much what our budget might actually be versus in the beginning when we were just projecting what we thought might happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, board member Takahashi, if I may. Which number are you specifically looking at?
Oh, the 5.8 million was the, Measure P 538 funds, but just the whole budget as a whole, this is pretty close to what we had talked about in May. And that reduction in the projects, especially the capital improvement projects in May, was because of the COVID projections of having less funding than we originally were thinking we were going to have. So
the $13 million is the same number that you saw that was reduced as a result of COVID. That number stays stagnant and the same for the entire year, maybe with the potential of changing with a mid-year budget. The board probably knows that a couple of council meetings ago, finance director presented the forecasts to the council and forecast the deficits over the next 5 years that we could potentially face. So for the purpose of this quarterly update, it's remains the same as far as the budget. And as Hoon said, to report to the board the progress on the projects that we are making through the fiscal year, each quarter going forward.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions. On the list of where the pop-up projects are and underneath that new projects, are any of these projects coming from the general fund or are they all funded from other sources?
Those projects are all under other sources.
Okay. And specifically the downtown Burbank Metrolink access, what is that one?
I believe that's making an access connection from the Metrolink to, I think it's Olive. I don't know the details. It's a CDD project, and it's, I believe, developer driven.
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
It's developer driven or development driven.
Do you happen to know if it's like a pedestrian path or if what?
Yes.
You don't know.
No, my understanding it is pedestrian access.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And then one more question. My notes. For the completed projects, thank you for that, by the way. That's really helpful to see the completed projects. So I actually have two questions about this page. Are any of these projects funded or partially funded by Measure P funds? I don't think they are because they're from last year, but I wanted to double check.
I'm not sure of the funding breakdown. There might be some Measure P funds because some of these funds could have been approved. Additional funds might have been added. So I don't have the breakdown actually of the fund breakdown. So if that's something you would like for me to report back to, then I could definitely get more information on that.
Okay. The reason why I ask is I think it might be valuable for the community to see completed projects like this that have been funded by Measure P to understand more concretely where that fund is going. I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding in the community of where the Measure P funds are going, and having a concrete example of things that have been completed might be great to have, showcased for the community.
And that's definitely the goal. So as I think we progress throughout the years and each quarter, and as more projects with Measure P funding gets completed, and I think we could actually report that in a more clear, defined way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my last question, I'm sorry, does someone else have something? Okay. My last question regarding that. Okay. Was the CDD has a webpage on the city website with the different developments that are going on and what stages they're at. And looking at this list, and I love how it shows like what stage each of these projects are. Would this list potentially be useful to have available to the public so that they can see the status of some of these projects, just like we can look at the status of the developments that are going on in the city? Or is that available already online and I just haven't seen it?
As far as I I may have to defer to Ken on that, where as far as if you want to put that on our city website.
It's a good question, and we are going through a website revision. So I don't believe we show active construction projects, but it's a good idea and something we can consider as we go through our revision to the website. But a good thing for us to show the public that we're doing. So thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah.
So we do have a utility coordination map that we put together, I think updated either quarterly or every 6 months. So I know that we include a lot of the utility as far as utility company projects that they're forecasting, and also I believe development, and also city projects that are under construction. As far as the planning and design, I don't believe we put that information for public works project, but we do have some information that we do post, I believe.
Okay. I think it might be valuable as to Mr. Jackson's question. For example, he had a question about that. I drive by that same project on Verdugo, wondering the same thing, what's going on there. Now that's maybe not something that would show up on the website, but there are other projects that perhaps a community might drive by, and it would be nice to have a place to go where they can look it up and see what's going on in the community. I think that would be useful to have. So thank you for considering it.
Yeah,
That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And one other thing that we do want to do when we have Measure P fund projects, we're going to add project signs so that we do publicize that it is a Measure P fund project. So and then city projects. So I think city projects will be more evident when I say city public works projects. When it's BWP, it's actually they're kind of have their own program, so we wouldn't be really dictating what they do and how they actually publicize their projects.
Thank you. Great questions, Ms. Takahashi. And thank you, Mr. Hahn, and Mr. Berkman for the good answers. Mr. Vandervoort, do you have some questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. First, let me add my voice of appreciation to Mr. Hahn and Mr. Berkman for the report. It was very clear and very helpful. And I'm sure you know very well, we're in our second year as members of the board, and this is our first quarterly report, so I'm very excited. I look forward to subsequent reports. I have a couple of quick questions only because there was an opportunity to review it. There is an ongoing carryover funds of about $1,229,000 for the Olive Verdugo intersection, very close to where the work that's being done, which, by the way, I believe is gas line work, just simply by having seen the equipment that was working in that area. But that's just my observation from getting my coffee at McDonald's. But in any case, my question is this project's status is on the planning stages. Has there been any further advancement to your knowledge? And if you don't know, that's okay. Maybe just a quick little blurb in an email to all of our members just to let us know. The last time I looked into this project, there were a number of options that were being presented to the neighborhood, including the ability to do some work that was subject to funding that was available from other sources. Do you know the status of this at all?
I'm sorry, which project are you referring to?
Olive/Verdugo intersection improvements. That's where Sparks, Olive, and Verdugo come in what is very nasty intersection because there's just too many of them to try to manage traffic. And I do it as a pedestrian a lot, so I know it's a tough intersection.
Yeah, so that's actually a CDD project I believe they're going back to the drawing board, so to speak. So I think the original concept wasn't really accepted well. And then also the funding, I believe the estimate for what they actually, the grant they received was extremely below what they actually needed. So they're in the process of regrouping and trying to figure out what they want to do and looking at different options. So I know that they really went back to just kind of regroup. So it's definitely still in the planning phases.
Got you. So if that's a good answer for me, then if nothing has advanced any further, then I don't think we need to ask for anything further. I also have a quick observation. I know under completed projects, we show a couple of projects on the DeBell Golf Course. I think the bunker renovation and some car track renovation, et cetera, is completed. And we still have another $700 or $600 and some $1,000 for pending projects. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
And I know that's Parks and Rec as well. For whatever odd reason, I came up on an article not too long ago about, it's not a very recent article, about the St. Andrews golf course in Scotland, where they actually closed the course on Sundays and the public uses the golf course other than the greens and the bunkers. People are able to play frisbee, picnic, run around, whatever they do. I've always felt that a golf course is a bit of a luxury, and I know I'm about to probably be shot through the television and some tomatoes are flying right now. But I wonder, and I'm just simply planting a seed of question. And if you don't question, you never get to really develop any alternate possibilities. But we have this enormous facility. I walk past it often, and sometimes it's well utilized, sometimes it's not. It's a tremendous facility. It's certainly the pride of our city. But in order to utilize the golf course, you have to either pay a fee, or if you're lucky enough, you're under 18, then you can play for free. I think you still can. I just want my colleagues to hear my opinion that there may be an opportunity to do more with that golf course than simply keep it only as a golf course, particularly when we continue to put in major public dollars that at this point are fairly limited to a particular subset group of people who only play golf. So having said that, for all my golfing friends, please don't text me or email me. I just simply wanted to consider that there's always possibilities that we should always keep looking for that make for better use. You know, we are a city that has limited park capacity. I think we're under parked, and that's one of the reasons we made a deal with the school district 18 years ago to be able to use their fields. And here is this facility that, in my humble opinion, is grossly underutilized. And there may be an opportunity if St. Andrews, the jewel golf course of the world, can close on a Sunday, can the bell be considered at a certain time for other facilities? It doesn't have to be done every Sunday, but it can be done once a month or twice a year to open the course for people to come and use it. And perhaps, by the way, cultivate golfers to come once they get to see the course up close in person. Sorry, that was my rant for the moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderboort. Do we have any further comments? All right, well, seeing none, I want to also agree that it's great to see this report. It's very exciting to see everything happening in our city and all the good things heading our way, especially the State of the City address, seeing all those projects coming and also seeing it in concrete. And the other thing is, I lost my thought. What was I going to say? Oh, I wanted to say that I have been on both sides where I've been on the project working on a city street and also had a project happen on my street, and so I know there needs to be patience on both sides. So hopefully we can slow down when we see those people out there working hard and also hopefully they'll have patience with us and respect our yards and everything else that we have going on. So is that everything for this report? Are we complete? All right.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the Central Library Design Study. I'm sorry?
Chair, I think Mr. Avassian wanted to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you there. Go right ahead.
Hi, I just have a question from Mr. Hahn. You briefly mentioned about utility coordination, quarterly utility coordination. Do you have a policy to prevent utility companies to come in and do trenching in your newly resurfaced streets?
Yeah, I believe we have a moratorium on payments, on new payments. I'm not sure if that's 5 years or a little bit longer. That's I'm not sure the duration of that. So we do have a moratorium, and as far as the coordination efforts to hopefully prevent that, that's why the coordination map that our group puts together, I believe actually tries to capture that.
If I may, through the chair, Board Member Avassian, I believe it's a 2-year moratorium at 100%. They would have to pay full width of the street. And then it gradually gets less as the years go back to, I think, 5 years. So say, could be a half street where they are, could be a lane. So we definitely have a moratorium to protect the public investment of newly paved streets. And that's, of course, as you know, a great purpose of a coordination meeting is so we and the utilities can get together and overlay our capital plans together and make sure we don't have that conflict. So we do our best we can with them to help each other out. So appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good questions. Last call, does anybody else have anything? All right. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 3, Central Library Design Study.
All right, good evening, Chair Coronado and members of the board. My name is Elizabeth Goldman. I'm the Library Services Director for the City of Burbank, and I'm very happy to be here with you tonight with several of our consultants on this project to gather public input and do some updated cost estimating about options for a future central library. Before I hand it over to our consultants, I wanted to give some background to this board because you are a relatively new board, and this project has been going on for a very long time. So Burbank has been discussing the Central Library, the fate of the Central Library since 1989. The current building was built in 1963. So about 25 years later, there was a citywide facility study done that identified that we needed a modernized building and more space. And in the past 31 years, very little has happened, unfortunately. There were some minor improvements in the 1990s, some carpet, some paint, partial furniture. In 2002, a civic center master plan was completed, and that included presented for the first time the idea of, actually it wasn't the first time, but carried forward the idea of a library being sited across Glen Oaks, where the parking lot and the Wells Fargo building are right now. And that civic center master plan, the only piece of it that ever came to fruition is the community services building. In 2003, the residents of Burbank did pass by 68% Measure L, which approved bond funding for a new library. That was contingent on receiving some matching funds from the state of California. The city applied for those matching funds in 2003 and 2004, unfortunately unsuccessfully, and the state no longer offers funding for public libraries at this point in time. That was funding lost in the last recession. And then there was a smaller plan in 2011 that involved actually utilizing the space in the Wells Fargo, which is no longer an option. That building is not sound for any staff presence at this point in time. So this study that we're doing this year is the first time since 2002 that we've really taken a deeper look at the community's priorities for use of space in a new library. And it's the first time since then that a professional cost estimate has been done. So the current study originally came up in 2016. I was new to the city and Ron Davis was new to being city manager. We had a discussion and brought a proposal to the city council that was approved to utilize some development impact fee funding in order to conduct this study. We did a full RFP and we selected the consultants who are here with us today. That project at the time was put on hold because of the structural deficit until after the passage of Measure P. So Measure P passed, thankfully. Then the city manager retired. We got a new city manager, discussed it again, and decided to revitalize the project last year and began our public input at the very start of this year, right before COVID happened. There was a small change in scope over the 2 years that the project was delayed, and that's mostly because there's been a lot of other movement in city planning and discussion about the civic center area. The Community Development Department has recently begun a downtown Burbank specific plan that includes the civic center area and is looking broadly at the best use of land and opportunities for lots in the area. And there's also been a lot of discussion in the past few years about public-private partnerships, and that is something that may closely relate to this project eventually. So I do want to emphasize that the current project is not a design of a library. The infrastructure board has not prioritized this as a project to actually do, nor has the council. It's on the list of unfunded capital needs, which, as you know, is quite extensive. So at this time, there hasn't been a decision made on either a location or a budget. And the Civic Center Master Plan, of course, needs to be updated as well and has not been completed, but this will be a component of that. So the goals of the current project were to provide content that's going to help inform all of those future decisions. We previously had been using very outdated public input, and libraries have changed an awful lot since 2002. If your public input was that old, it barely reflected the role libraries play today in technology and digital learning, in entrepreneurship, in social services. A lot has changed since then. So we wanted to update our public input. We also were working off of some pretty vague numbers in terms of what the real cost would be. So that's what we have accomplished with the study here, which is in draft form. It was presented to the Board of Library Trustees last week for their comments, and we're bringing it here to you tonight for your questions and input. And then at some point, we will be taking it to the City Council as well for their thoughts. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'm going to hand it over to Ruth Baleko now to introduce the consultants who are on the call and explain the study.
Yeah. Good evening, Council. Thank you for adding us to your agenda. And I'll introduce our team. We have Micah Post, the project manager from Miller Hull. I'm a partner at Miller Hull. We're an architecture firm with studios in both Seattle and San Diego, and have been doing public oriented work for over 40 years along the West Coast. We also have our landscape architect, Marique Lacasse, from GGLO, and Michael Tegan, who has provided target cost information for this effort. So we wanted to start today by giving an overview of the process that we've been through with the community over the past year. So starting in January, like Elizabeth mentioned, we kind of rebooted the effort and really had some intense kind of couple of months where we had a public meeting. We joined the all-day staff workshop that was held. We did focus groups with the community and also met with members of the planning department. At the same time, we also established a physical display inside the library building, which many of you may have contributed to. So if someone wasn't able to make it to one of the in-person events that we held over the course of February, they were also able to contribute physically through that installation or digitally through an online survey. And you'll see the input that we got from all of those sources in a few minutes. In June, we also went in front of the Library Advisory Committee and helped us kind of make forward progress on our findings. And then here we are in October, having just met with the Board of Trustees and the Infrastructure Board. So we'll give you a sense of how that community input contributed to the report. Let's see. Here's our team. You may be able to see their faces down on the photos, but I'm definitely available for questions. So like Elizabeth mentioned, libraries have changed incredibly over just the 20 years, let alone the 60 to 70 years that your building has been witness to. And while libraries absolutely still provide that place to immerse yourself in books, regardless of age, like the image on the lower left, they are so many more things to so many more people. They can be an outside spot to pause or do story time. They can be a place for retraining, instruction, and education. They're even a great spot for Saturday robotics and STEM classes for local teens. And there might even be a weekend evening event that includes music or book clubs or just socializing amongst the community. So they've really broadened their reach and in doing so are much more inclusive.
Hey, Ruth, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but I don't see your screen.
Oh,
I don't know if anyone else does or if it's just me. Oh, I'm seeing some head shaking. Okay, now I can see. It's starting.
thanks, Monica. I wasn't, it was hard for me to tell on my end. Thank you for saying that.
You're on a roll.
Okay. Everyone can see it? Yep. Okay. My apologies. Okay, let's see here. So let's talk about that community outreach that we just described. These are some images from the community open houses that we held and the focus groups. And then on the upper right is that physical installation that we had in the library for about 6 weeks. The all-day staff workshop that we were able to participate in and really do some great engagement with the people that know your community so well was really helpful. And here is just an example of the hundreds of note cards that the community contributed to our installation. And Elizabeth and her team shipped them up to us in April so that we could start disseminating them. And these are just, they're heartwarming and charming and so insightful about your building. And remarkably, there are some common threads that came out of this. Here's just kind of a visual indicator of some of the terms that started to really rally around. And I think, you know, there's things that people mentioned many, many times, and there were always a few little anomalies that piqued our curiosity. So, like I said, that community input highlighted for us 5 common design themes that really were consistent across all of the groups during this outreach phase. And I'm going to go through each one here in a moment. So the first theme that really people talked about a lot was highlighting in a library, finding ways to highlight Burbank's identity. And Burbank's identity is obviously, you know, your really unique industry and your downtown that has all kinds of unique businesses. It's also what came up time and time again was this small town community feel, approachable, friendly. It's much more of a kind of a spirit that people talked about that needs to come across in a new building. And then your unique history really was something people were proud of, whether, you know, that is kind of the aerospace industry that you were pioneers in, the animation studios that are still ever present today. And I think those were the kinds of things that while you don't intend to be, you know, a kind of a rear-facing museum, you need to carry that legacy and that history and that pride forward in a new facility. And like we mentioned, you know, the community really talked a lot about being forward-looking. You know, what can we do to benefit the community? How can we capitalize on future opportunities? You know, and how is the library really the core of that mission? And so thinking about the animation and studio and tech industry that you have, how can we showcase that talent resident in your community? How can we encourage and excite and intrigue people to learn more about it, whether that's music or animation or technology? And how can we train the next generation to really be a vital part of that economy that you have in Burbank? Number 4, it wouldn't be a library if we weren't talking about the children, because the youth services is such a huge part of not only a library program, but its energy. And, you know, I think many of us grew up loving the library that we knew as a child, and that leads to adult library users. So that's, you know, incredibly important for communities in addition to kind of the literacy skills that you're building early in life. So, you know, while, we all remember story time, like down in the center photo, libraries for children have really expanded in the same way that it has for adults. So are there early literacy kind of interactives that prepare you to learn to read? Are there moments where caregivers and their children can maybe learn technology together? Maybe there's some exciting immersive VR that allow youth to explore different environments. And maybe it's a middle school, you know, gaming afternoon or a Saturday evening that gives teens another place to be. Lastly, that pride in Burbank also came through in the notion that the city is very well managed very well run. And investing in the city and using resources responsibly was something that you knew your community has been doing and should continue to do. And whether that's our use of, PV or water capture, or maybe just making sure that we're not using, we're doing sustainable plantings for kind of drought prone environments. Maybe investing in the city is about creating a civic destination that people now see as a downtown heart. There's many ways we can invest in the city, and that did come through in people's comments. Now, when we talk about investing in the city and using resources wisely, was there a question? I thought I heard a voice. No? Okay. We wanted to take just a little moment to talk about sustainability. And in the report, what we did was for the purposes of making some cost assumptions, we did include the things that are required locally or by state requirements. And you're seeing some of these here on the list. So LEED Gold, battery storage for resiliency, making sure we're including some social equity measures, and improving the water and materials and indoor environmental air quality. So these are all kind of a baseline of sustainability assumptions for the building. And obviously there would be things you could go above and beyond to do, like becoming net zero energy or a living building or other highly sustainable measures. But we just really included kind of a baseline of things that are requirements currently. Micah, did I capture that correctly?
I just want to rephrase it a little bit. So for the report, we did capture the minimum requirements, and then we did go one step above that, and we made recommendations that were above minimum requirements for the pricing. So these measures are one step above minimum requirements, and you could go beyond that, and we do list those out as well, but those are not included in the cost estimate.
That's helpful clarification. Thank you.
Okay.
So as part of those common themes that we heard from the community, our team, with our expertise in landscape design and library spaces, started to generate a list of the program areas or the spaces inside and outside the building that would help fulfill the community needs that we heard. So what you'll see in the report are an itemization of the spaces that help create the library environment, as well as a brief description of their functional expectations and the kinds of activities they could support. And in addition to the areas that have collection and technology, we're also talking about areas where staff can assist patrons. We're talking about outdoor areas where you can gather or spend a quiet moment to read. Also areas for people inside the building, so that we're going beyond just kind of storing books, but providing a lot of place for people to be. And I think loud and clear, some of the things that came through were places for meetings, for people to come in and work, take classes, some of those spaces that go, that really start to make it a multi-use facility. The other thing we did, in addition to kind of hearing from the community and starting to create that inventory of space needs, we also wanted to make sure we were calibrating what we were hearing with some of your peer institutions. And these are some nearby libraries that Elizabeth felt like were representative of not only your kind of socioeconomic region, but also some of relative use patterns. So you're seeing libraries. I'm going to show you the graph on the left first. You're seeing population size on the bottom and square footage of library per capita on the left side of the matrix. And you're seeing that in terms of population, you're really kind of low in terms of the amount of square footage per capita. So amongst peer institutions, you're doing a lot with less space. And I think what's really telling is when you realize you're doing a lot more in less space than your peers, what we also see is that you're one of the highest user in terms of traffic and visits. So you're also accommodating a lot more visits in a little less space than your peer institutions. So what that tells us is there is a space need in terms of right sizing a future building, just to kind of, we're not overshooting, we're not kind of moonshotting an overly large building, but we're not shortchanging it either. We're kind of right sizing you right along with your peers. Lastly, the other measure we did was really look at how the existing facility is configured today. And again, this was a building built in the early 60s where library functionality was very different. Our expectations about spaces for people in a library were different. Our expectations and our codes around accessibility were different. And I think what you see in the diagram on the left is a function of space utilization that was very appropriate at that time. So you're seeing about 40% of the building is support spaces. That is areas like hallways, stairwells, bathrooms, mechanical space, places that help run the building, but don't necessarily allow for places to be. And almost equal to that at 43% were places for people. And so that ratio was distinctly off compared to facilities that we see and the benchmarks that we typically have in our data capture. And the staff space was a little high. We like to see that more in the 10 to 12% for a regional facility like yours. So what we also realized was, gosh, even if we didn't add any space, if we could just make the same amount of space more efficient, we would really be gaining a lot more square footage. So when we started mapping out the new building, we also made sure in the program that the space types were more in alignment with an efficient modern building. So the support space is in the range we like to see it, in the 20 to 25%. And look how much more space we start to get for people. A much higher percentage of a new structure could be organized to accommodate people and collection and seating and meeting rooms. So getting that ratio right is really imperative. We, in collaboration with the city, there were a couple of sites downtown that we were asked to examine because they exhibited a number of the criteria that community said was important to them. The two sites are shown here near the current Central Library. The kind of L-shaped site that's adjacent to Community Services Building, and then across 3rd Street on kind of the west side of the City Hall. So let's first talk about the Community Services Building, like that adjacent parcel. Right now it's kind of a number of parking lots. There's kind of a general slope on the site. And I think it really did have the proximity to downtown and transit, the walkability, the amount of space that would allow you to create an outdoor destination in addition to a library facility. Those were all strengths to this location. At the same time, we looked at that City Hall site because it had some of the same attributes, but you'll notice it's just a bit smaller in size. And that probably meant you might not be able to create as much of an outdoor kind of destination or plaza, and the building might end up being a bit taller to fit the space needs that we heard from the community. And so as part of this exercise, we took, everything we heard from the community, shaped by the 5 shared goals, generated a space list of square footages that we calibrated against kind of where we want to see efficiencies and against your nearby benchmarks. And then Michael started helping us assemble target budgets for these, because like Elizabeth mentioned, we have not designed the building. There aren't kind of floor plans and renderings. This is just kind of putting a budget together for a building that could be built to meet some of these needs and performance criteria. So I think you're also reading the text on the top. These numbers are meant to provide a comprehensive picture of all costs that could be associated. So the bricks and mortar and paying the contractor, but all of the other kind of ancillary costs that come along with a capital project in a public area. So things like parking, master use planning, infrastructure improvements, some of the things that come along with that. So the renovation, that is the effort you're seeing on the first scenario that we took a look at. So if you renovated the existing structure, didn't add on, but brought it up to current life safety codes, removed the hazardous materials, made the site and the building a bit more accessible, it would take about $54 million to rehabilitate that into kind of current standard of functionality and life safety. And then we took a look at Site A, which was near the community services building. And you can see that in this scenario, we are plugging in the square footage from our space list. We were talking, that site based on its size, looking at kind of the site development of it, the parking, that starts to, the target budget for that, we started to see at about $103 million. And then at Site B, again, the same square footage, the site work starts to be a little bit less because just a function of the site area. But the building, may be a little bit more costly because we might be building up vertically a bit more. And that's, a very similar, relatively speaking, at around 107 million. So I don't know, Elizabeth, if you'd like to chime in here a little bit, especially as we go into next steps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth, for that presentation. What I just wanted to let you know before we move on to questions is that after tonight, we will be working on scheduling this presentation to go to the City Council for their input as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this whole project is really part of the larger context of the Downtown Burbank Specific Plan, which is underway right now from the Community Development Department, and exploring opportunities for a potential public-private partnership that could include this site, other sites, the library, other buildings, housing, any number of things. And I believe on an upcoming agenda, this board will be receiving more information about how public-private partnerships work. So then once we have presented to the City Council for final input, we will finalize this report and then it will be available for all of those other discussions. So with that, thank you, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that great report. Does any of the board members have questions? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a very good report. Thank you, Elizabeth and Ruth. A couple questions. Your mission and your assignment from the city is the pre-planning phase. It's not currently for construction documents. Hopefully, maybe you'll get the nod. Is that correct?
The original scope we were hired for was for this study. Elizabeth, you could kind of speak to if there's contractual details you'd like to share.
Just that if this project were to be selected to move forward, there would be another full process to select the firm that would be doing actual design and construction.
My wife and I have been very involved in the past with the libraries. We worked on the bond measure Prop L in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, as you said in your preamble, we weren't able to get matching funds. If I remember correctly, the new library was costed out something like about 50 million. So we've doubled the cost in 15 to 20 years, but so be it. Just a couple details, and really it's not yet your purview, but as I said, hopefully maybe you will be involved in construction. I hope we focus on the Glen Oaks Olive Corner, I guess side A. It seems the city in its office buildings has sort of turned its back on the major artery, which is Glen Oaks. And I think that personally would be a better site. Also, it's larger and can accommodate probably not having to go down as deep for your parking. I assume your 313 or was it 303 parking stalls is based on what? Is there a parking standard for libraries in the city?
It's a parking standard for libraries that was provided to us by the Community Development Department.
Okay, right.
Based on the square footage of the building.
All right. I mean, it amazes me, the community service building, when I come to visit pre-COVID, there may be almost no people in the lobby dealing with staff, but the parking lot is near capacity. And I've suspected that those are folks that are frequenting the courthouse across the street, even though that building does have a parking structure. So there is an issue of parking in that area for the public, and to have the library, which currently is woefully underparked, to have adequate parking. Two other things. I have some friends down in Cerritos, and I don't know if you folks have journeyed into Orange County. I think that's Orange County. They have just a gorgeous library. It's about a decade old or more, but it's I think a gold standard with regards to what cities can accomplish. One final point. And I'll try to say this diplomatically. Our libraries serve a lot of functions, and they've also become sort of a home for folks who don't have homes. And I remember the last time I was in the library, the main library before the pandemic, I had to go to the restroom, and there was a fellow taking a bath in the sink. So I hope we design to accommodate, but not, to encourage that type of usage. But I hope we can move forward. I hope the city can find funding. I used to be a patron of the library every week when I had an hour and a half commute getting audiobooks. And my wife's name is on the plaque at the Buena Vista Library. So you do have a lot of support in the community. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Takahashi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation this evening. That was encouraging to see, and it's great to see updates about the library. I have a few questions. In regards to the thought about designing the new library and how this current library was built quite a number of years ago, how long do you expect this new library to last, and will there be considerations for updates and longevity and that kind of thing? So has that been part of the equation in planning for this?
Sure. Would you like me to take this, Elizabeth, or would you like to?
You can go ahead.
Okay, that's a great question. And we get asked that a lot because you're making a really significant once in a generation investment. So there needs to be reassurance that the money is being invested in a way that it can stand that test of time. So as architects, some of the things that we try to embed in public buildings that need to have that longevity are a couple things. The notion of resiliency, first of all, and that's especially relevant right now when we're thinking about the disruptions that we see in our world. And by disruptions, it could be anything. It could be wildfires where the outdoor air is smoky and we need to be able to close up the building and people need a place to be during the day, that's comfortable and safe to breathe. Maybe it's when there's an earthquake and the library is an essential, facility that people can come to and get water or understand what the city's doing. Maybe it's, obviously we're seeing impacts to public amenities due to COVID-19. So how could the building still provide services with like curbside right now, like Elizabeth's doing, or if there's outdoor space where people could still come and get books. So resiliency is a notion that has been with us for a long time. And I think we need to make sure that the building is resilient for you to be able to stand all of those disruptions to come. The second thing we think about is adaptability. I think when buildings were built, 50s, 60s, 70s, the image we had about predictability of our future was different. And the last 20 years have shown us rapid change to where we have different expectations for our building to be able to adapt to. I want to bring 18 more outlets to this meeting room because everyone needs to plug in. I need to be able to have 50 children in story time because we've grown from 20 children. The reference collection is no longer. How can I repurpose that space really seamlessly? This is just a few that I'm kind of brainstorming for example, but the building needs to be able to do that. And so what we think about are large, flexible, unobstructed spaces. So things like columns, idiosyncratic geometries, multiple level changes, all of those things start to make a building inflexible for as you kind of ebb and flow within it over time. And so I think those are two really, really basic things that we think about as architects that would give you the longevity. The third thing is operations and maintenance. We, as a long-term building owner, we absolutely have to be thinking about how the materials we choose, the way they come together, how are we limiting your kind of maintenance burden? For example, if you use wood siding and you have to restain it every 3 years because of the UV in California, that's not a smart decision. But if we can use masonry or concrete, metal, other materials that don't come with a maintenance burden and have a much longer lifespan, those are the kinds of things we think about. None of those I'm saying are verbatim for a building you might build, but just in terms of discussion.
Great, thank you. And then also in consideration of things like ADA requirements or new technology that might be coming in, or maybe different ways that we transport, transportation changes, that kind of thing. Are those also in consideration?
Absolutely. And to add on to ADA, which was signed in the early 90s, accessibility has really become the norm and the legal expectation, but we've really broadened that culturally to now include accessibility for all genders, all cultures, all socioeconomic and racial inclusion. So that notion of accessibility is not really just singled toward disabilities. And now we're looking at a much broader lens of inclusion.
Thank you. That's great to hear. A couple more questions, more simply, I think. For construction A and B, just, kind of ballpark, how many stories are those two you thinking those might be? We don't have very tall buildings in our downtown, so I'm just concerned.
No, we would, to your point, need to conform to zoning code. So height limits, setbacks, things like that. And then it really depends on the site and how large of a footprint we want for ease of movement and sight lines. Both sites are a different size. So our priorities for outdoor space would start to work in conjunction with how we think about indoor space. We really didn't do any design to be able to answer that question with any detail, but those are the kind of considerations that would play.
Okay, great. And my last question might be for Ms. Goldman. Has there been any discussion yet or any thoughts or brainstorming of if we were to, as a city, build a new library on a different site, what would happen with the old building, with the current site of the Central Library?
Great.
There have not been any formal discussions about that yet. There are many ideas out there. The current library has a host of accessibility and hazardous materials type of issues. Were you to start making changes with it, but on the other hand, it's very, very solid construction. It came through the Northridge earthquake without a problem, which was not true of a lot of other city buildings. It's at a great location, so there's possibilities of repurposing it for sure. I've heard every idea from a museum to housing to retail. And so there's lots of possibilities there, as well as possibilities of utilizing that lot for something else. But there have not been any formal city discussions about that at this point.
Okay. Just putting it out there that the feedback I've heard in discussions around the library is that it's a very cherished building, and people like the historical aspect of it and the feel and look of it. So just putting that out there as information I've heard.
And I'll also add, I've had a lot of those conversations with people too. And one thing that interests me is, the historical features are really on the exterior of the building. The interior, some of the historical features have been covered up over the years, but they really weren't there. It's a concrete box on the inside. Architects can do wonderful things to, for instance, preserve some of the architectural features and maybe utilize them in the new building or remaining on that site or refer to them in interesting ways. So I think that's definitely something we would take into consideration.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Takahashi. Mr. Vanderboord?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Goldman, thank you very much for bringing this to our board. And Ruth, thank you for the presentation. It's incredibly exciting to think about the future, and at the same time, as Mr. Jackson has indicated, it's extremely expensive to consider the future. And the reality is that we don't know where we're going to land whenever this breaks ground, and I certainly hope it does. I mean, like Mr. Jackson, I remember when we were considering the Buena Vista Library, we were making deals with the school district to buy their land in order to be able to develop that library, and it has been wildly successful by any accounts of the imagination. It's just unbelievably, it's used a lot. I appreciate all the answers that Ruth gave with respect to the flexibility and the realities. I mean, you just described, Ms. Goldman, what happens in libraries today being very different than what happened 20 years ago, or perhaps even 15 years ago. It's not that long. I think flexibility is going to be the key to any public building in an effort to get the most bang for our dollars in investment. Have you any ideas of funding for the next phase yet, Ms. Goldman?
Well,
the next phase being one in which you actually start the design process.
There's a number of options available. Our now outgoing finance director, Mr. Aldo, has done a wonderful presentation in the past that includes all the different ways you can fund a study or a building. In terms of an actual design, there are some funds that the City Council had set aside many years ago toward this project. Some of them have ended up being used for maintenance on the existing building, but there still is a chunk of money, as well as development impact fees, which have a lot of restrictions on them, but can generally be used for looking at expanding services for a population that clearly is quite different from 1963. So there's some funds set aside. Then there's also, you probably wouldn't do this just for design, but for construction, of course, there's any number of tax measures, of bonds, of utilizing some of our Measure P money to accompany some other funding from another source, and the public-private partnership idea. But really, until this project is prioritized to really move us forward, then it's not worth putting a great amount of detail into identifying funding, because what funding's available is heavily dependent on the timing that we actually decide to move forward.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I know, as part of the oversight board here, we certainly have the ability to hopefully keep you in mind with respect to whatever the next steps are, to the extent that we have any funds that can be used in that direction. I thank you for the opportunity to have this presentation and listen to it, and also remain excited about the future of a new library. Like Mr. Jackson, I am a fan of Site A. By all means, I feel that should be part of our civic center, and I think behind the city hall probably is just trying to fit 5 pounds of potatoes into a 1 pound sack. It's a very tight site. And if we had no other option, I understand that, but we have the option of Site A, which is, as always, when I was involved in this 17 years ago, that was the preferred site back then. So hopefully it still remains the preferred site now. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me give my point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Vanderboort. Very good points. Any further comment? Mr. Avazian.
Thank you. Presentation was really interesting. I only have a suggestion to consider, just if it's possible, to look into repurposing the old IKEA place. Is that something that can be considered?
That idea has certainly been floated, as well as various parts of the Burbank Town Center Mall. Especially now, but even previously, So I really think, from my perspective, I would like this main library to remain in the downtown area. I think it can be a wonderful asset in terms of gathering places and ability to do, outdoor concerts and public gathering and art and all sorts of things, and really bring to life the civic center area. Those other spaces are very nearby and have a lot of opportunities too, in terms of being near the high school, being near neighborhoods. So anything's up for consideration, really. I wouldn't. I've spent enough time in a few jobs trying to move library building projects forward that I know you don't turn down any ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Avazian. Any further comment on this item? All right, well, I think we had a great report and some really good questions. I look forward to seeing what we do in the future on this. And repurposing that IKEA building, that would be great, because it's just sitting there right now. I also look forward to the technological changes that are coming in the future. It's nice to see that we're thinking about sustainability as well. And then the only comment I would add is that it would be nice to add to one of these projects, extra parking, and I'm sure you consider, what the needs are for the future, but as the city continues to build, that would be something that we would need more of. That would be my only comment. So both of these reports will be noted and filed. If we haven't gotten anything further, then we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which would be rescheduling the November and December meetings. So I have a couple of dates in front of me. As you remember, last year we canceled the November meeting and we split the difference between the two. It looks like we have held for us Thursday, December 3rd, Wednesday, December 9th, and Wednesday, December 23rd. Do any of my fellow board members have any recommendations? Mr. Vanderboort.
Madam Chair, certainly either the December 3rd or the 9th are better dates than the 23rd. And both of them work for me at this time, and unless something that I have no control of happens to come by.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson?
Jeff just expressed what I was going to say. I mean, I have no difficulty with the first two dates. The third date, I think, is too close to Christmas, and there might be other hopeful obligations and family involvement. And I would say, you know, this issue is going to come next year. So we need to, look ahead, I think, also, if not tonight, in the future, but be that as it may, I'm open to either of the first two dates.
Ms. Takahashi?
Similarly here, the 23rd doesn't work for us. We are leaving for a trip on the 24th. So the 3rd or the 9th works fine for me. Thank you.
Mr. Avazian?
Since two of our board members are not present, is this something that we can hold until next meeting that we have everybody on board?
No, unfortunately, our next meeting would be the November meeting, which is on Thanksgiving.
Okay, I'm open to any of the days. I don't have any preference.
Thank you. Well, I'm open on the 3rd or the 9th as well, and maybe we can just email our fellow board members who aren't present and set that date up, since we've all expressed which dates will work for us. Is that okay?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Jackson.
Move that we move the date to December 3rd.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it and reinforce it in the sense that with our two absent members, Thursday might be better for them. Since we normally meet on Thursdays, it would be potentially an easier day for them to schedule.
Great. So should we call for a vote?
Yes. Armin Avazian?
Yes.
Maria Coronado?
Yes.
Greg Jackson?
Yes.
Tamala Takahashi?
Yes.
And Jeff Vanderboort?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate we got that handled. And now we move to introduction of additional agenda items. I believe we already had one recommendation. Do we have any others?
Oh.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I don't know if you're alluding to my comment about our initial public speaker. I think it's been handled well now with our director, if he will personally show some involvement in directing the community person to community development staff. So I don't know if my colleagues feel that should come back. I thought initially that type of traffic issues was under our purview, but I guess it's been siphoned off and went to Public Works.
Thank you. Ms. Takahashi.
Now Public Works.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On that topic, yeah, maybe it's just me, but I'm not quite clear of what our responsibility is in that sphere. So on that item, I was going to request perhaps to bring it back more of a kind of a review of what our scope of responsibility is, and to understand that, and less of a presentation of how those particular permits are distributed, but more of a discussion amongst us about what it is where our responsibility lies in that area.
I'd support that.
I do too. I think we were given a memo long ago, but I have forgotten what it said. Sorry.
Madam Chair?
Next meeting.
I'm sorry.
Go right ahead, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, I have a couple of other items, not for being additional agenda items, but issues I would like to bring up. There was a good article in our local paper, the Burbank Leader, last month about the street resurfacing program. And talking about it involves 150 blocks in 2 areas more toward the airport. I was curious, the 150 blocks, what does that represent as the number of streets in those 2 sub areas? I don't know if you can answer that, Mr. Hahn. But I'm curious about that. And it also then goes into the issue of the pavement management program, which I did bring up last month. And I think it's important that we move forward in updating that report. And I would like to hear, the status of the pavement management program update.
So we are in the process of updating that. So once that's complete, we could definitely bring that to the board and update the study that's complete. As far as, the 150 blocks, I didn't quite understand your question.
Okay, there was a very nice article in the Burbank Leader. The headline was "Street resurfacing to involve about 150 blocks," and it talks about the 2 areas and how much is being done. And that sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's really a small portion of the city streets. Because I think, gosh, I don't remember. There were hundreds of miles of streets in the city. So I was curious what percentage the 150 blocks that are being resurfaced starting this month, supposedly according to what staff told the Burbank Leader, what that represents. Is that 10% or is it 2% of the streets in that particular area?
Yeah, I'm not aware of the percentage actually, but I know that the city, basically this is the last phase of the 10-year program.
All right.
The city was broken up into 10 different regions. And for the last 10 years, they've been going around and paving the area. So this is the last region that hasn't been paved in 10 years. So starting this fiscal year, the design for the 2021 project, when the design starts for that, we're going into a 5-year program. So we're actually breaking the city up into 5 different areas and then trying to get more done and cycle that through faster.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know my street hasn't been resurfaced in a quarter century, and it's not on a list for attention. You folks have concluded that it doesn't merit the thresholds of the potholes are not that significant, although they are significant to me when I run into them with my car. So I'm very concerned over that pavement management program and the status of bringing it up to 2020.
Yeah,
I don't want to belabor the issue.
Okay.
Second issue, we've come to a new design with our crosswalks. They're not really new design. I mean, they were on the Abbey Road album with the Beatles 50 years ago, but they're, rather than horizontal lines, there are a bunch of lines going across. So I assume we contract that work out. It's not done by Public Works, but do you have supervision purview on the work? Does Public Works monitor it?
So as far as the striping, we do have a striping crew. I don't know which ones that the city actually does. So we do maintain that. So we actually have a city crew, city staff that actually maintain and do some of the stripings. And as far as the striping, when it's related to a project, if it's project specific, then it's actually incorporated into the project.
Okay, why I mentioned this, up in my neighborhood, a number of intersections that are near the elementary school and the junior high school have that new configuration of striping. And I noticed on Kenneth and near middle school, they're wearing out and they've only been painted, I think, less than a year. And so I'm curious, what the longevity is expected for that striping at our crosswalks. Because I mean, if it's wearing out already, it's going to have to be done again, and that's a significant expense, I would think.
Yes. Lisa, is this something that we should be discussing at this time, or should we just bring it up actually as a future item?
It's a future item.
That would be my question. Yes, let's put that on the agenda for a future discussion.
So as far as the agenda, I guess what you want to report it back as, what's the standard for striping?
Well, who does it? I mean, does Public Works do it? Does another city department do it? Or do we contract it out? And, that to take into consideration, what is the longevity of these new crosswalk configurations that we are doing in Burbank? Because they seem to be wearing out sooner than they should, in my layman estimation.
Okay, we could definitely report back on that.
Okay.
Do we have a second on these added agenda items just for protocol?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, those are the two issues I wanted to bring up. One third item, the World Health Organization designated October Mental Health Month. And I created a little button here, Restore Sanity. And I just wanted to remind everybody this is an important issue, public health, and keep that in mind. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Ms. Takahashi, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a potential future agenda item. Earlier in the discussion this evening, it was mentioned about how the different departments are coordinating projects and working on that. To me, I'm really interested in that. And I don't know how, it's not an urgent item, but it would be interesting at some point to hear which projects you're coordinating on, how that coordination is happening, especially as we're facing, clearly our budget deficit and looking for ways to economize and be more efficient. It would be great to have an update on how that's working in our infrastructure area by creating efficiencies or working together to, reduce costs. So that's something that's interesting for me at some point.
And do we have a second for that future agenda item?
I second.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any other further potential agenda items?
Madam Chairman, before we adjourn, I do have an announcement that didn't quite make it to announcements from CDD, our Community Development Department. The city will be hosting an online community meeting on Thursday, November 5th at 6 p.m. to learn about the city's greenhouse gas reduction plan. This is a tool to quantify the city's share of the statewide greenhouse gas GHG emissions and to establish action steps to help the environment. The community will have the opportunity to ask questions and share ideas on how residents, businesses, and the city can help be a part of the plan to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. If you are unable to attend and would like to share your input through the online survey, please visit www.burbankca.gov/climate action plan. Or you can call Fred Ramirez or Karen Pan at 818-238-5187. And if any of the IOB members are interested in attending this meeting, please remember you cannot attend in a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you for that announcement. And so I have a pending agenda items will be public-private partnerships and update on sales tax income. And so we're moving to adjourn the meeting to our next meeting, which will be Thursday, December 3rd, 2020. We'll see you all then, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.